My husband didn't shout it. He didn't cry or shake or show any kind of remorse. He leaned back on that soft leather couch in the therapist's office, folded his arms, and let the words roll out with a little smirk, like he was talking about a movie he preferred, not a woman he'd vowed to spend his life with. The therapist actually froze. I heard her breath catch, saw the pen pause above her notebook. This was a woman who had probably heard every confession, every betrayal, every late-stage marriage disaster you can imagine. And even she needed a second. My heart didn't race. It slowed. There's a kind of calm that comes when the worst thing you've been afraid of finally steps into the light and introduces itself. I was sitting at the other end of the couch, hands laced together so tightly my knuckles were white. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. I stared at him, at the man I'd been with for 12 years, married to for 9, the father of our 2 kids, the person I thought I was fighting for in this counseling room. The therapist leaned forward. "Can you repeat what you just said?" He turned his head toward me, eyes strangely cold, like he had already left and was just waiting for his body to catch up. "I said if my ex asked today, I'd run back to her. That's how I feel. I'm just being honest." Honest. Something in my chest tightened, but my voice came out steady. "Then run." He blinked. "What?" I stood up, smoothing my skirt with hands that weren't quite done shaking. "You heard me," I said quietly. "You want her? Run." "Linda, let's not make any rash decisions," the therapist cut in, panic creeping into her voice. "There's nothing rash about this," I replied, eyes still on my husband. "He just told you he'd leave me for another woman if she crooked her finger. I'm just taking him at his word." He stared at me like he didn't recognize the woman in front of him. For years, I'd bent, softened, compromised, swallowed my hurt for the sake of peace. This wasn't that woman. I picked up my bag, nodded politely at the therapist, and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. That night, he showed up at my brother's place, then at my door, eyes red, voice shaking, saying he didn't mean it, that he was just confused, that we needed to talk. And I almost let him in, until he saw who was already sitting in my living room. His face went white. His legs almost gave out. Because if he thought his ex was the only one who could change everything, he was wrong. I had my own surprises, and one of them was already there, waiting for him. People always assume marriages fall apart because of one catastrophic event, a betrayal, a lie, a moment of weakness that spirals into destruction. But in my experience, marriages don't explode. They erode. They soften at the edges, weaken in the middle, hollow out in the quiet spaces where love used to grow. That erosion started long before the therapy session, where my husband said he'd run back to his ex, long before the distance, long before the phone secrecy, long before the smirk that told me everything I needed to know. My name is Linda. I'm 36. I've been married for 9 years, together with my husband for 12. We have 2 children, an 8-year-old son who loves soccer, and a 6-year-old daughter who clings to my hand when she sleeps. I built my life around my family. Everything I did, my work schedule, my weekends, my social life, was designed to keep our home whole. But even the strongest home can't stay standing when one person quietly walks out emotionally and never tells you they left. My husband and I didn't start out broken. We were young when we met, and he was charming, warm, protective in that gentle way that makes you feel safe without feeling controlled. We built a life the old-fashioned way, slowly, intentionally, bought a house, painted the kids' rooms together, took family trips, stayed up late planning futures we thought were set in stone. Even when we argued, we found our way back. We worked through stress, exhaustion, the chaos of parenting young kids. At least I thought we did. I never expected that while I was holding our life together, he was quietly pulling threads from the seams. About a year ago, subtle changes started creeping in. Not big enough to identify at first, but small enough to sting when I thought too hard about them. He stopped lingering in conversations. He stopped reaching for my hand in the car. He started sleeping with his phone face down, passcode changed, notifications silenced. He left for errands that took hours, came home smelling of cologne I didn't recognize, brushed off my questions with tight smiles. I excused every sign. He's stressed. He's tired. He's overwhelmed. But stress doesn't make someone hide their phone. Overwhelm doesn't make someone forget they have a spouse. And exhaustion doesn't make someone emotionally abandon the home they built. 3 months before therapy, something shifted sharply. He became distant in a way I couldn't reach anymore. Even when he was physically present, his eyes were somewhere else, somewhere I wasn't invited to follow. He stopped coming to family dinners, claiming he had errands or work projects. He avoided movie nights. He tucked the kids in quickly and retreated to the garage or the office. His laugh changed too. It wasn't shared with me anymore. It was hidden behind closed doors, whispered into a phone he guarded like a secret limb. I asked him once, softly, if something was wrong. He shrugged. Just life. But life doesn't steal someone's warmth overnight. Life doesn't replace affection with indifference. Life doesn't make a man look at his wife like she's a commitment he regrets instead of a partner he chose. Back in July, I suggested therapy. He dismissed it immediately. We're fine, he said. But we weren't. And deep down, I think he already knew that. Then, suddenly, in October, he insisted we go. That should have been my first clue something was deeply wrong. People don't run to therapy overnight unless they're drowning, or unless they want someone else to take responsibility for a decision they've already made in their hearts. I said yes, because I still believed in us. I still believed in marriage as something worth repairing. I didn't realize I would walk into therapy alone while my husband walked in carrying the ghost of someone he'd never fully let go. When he brought up his ex during the second session, my stomach dropped. When he said he had been thinking about her, my hands went cold. When he hesitated before answering the therapist's question about contact, I felt the ground shift beneath me. But the truth I didn't want to face was this. I had been losing him long before that moment. I just didn't know how far gone he already was. And by the time he told the therapist he'd run back to her, the erosion was complete. That was the day I realized I wasn't fighting for my marriage anymore. I was fighting alone. The cracks in my marriage did not appear suddenly. They arrived quietly, disguised as ordinary moments I tried too hard to rationalize. If I had looked closely, really looked, I would have seen the seeds of conflict long before they grew into the disaster waiting for me in that therapy room. It started subtle, a shift in my husband's energy, something small enough that I convinced myself it was just stress. He began spending more time alone. Long errands that used to take 20 minutes now stretched into hours. He stayed up late in the living room, staring at his phone, the brightness reflecting off his face while I lay alone in our bed pretending to sleep. The first real red flag was how protective he became of his phone. My husband used to leave his phone anywhere. Kitchen counter, bathroom sink, buried under laundry. He never cared if I picked it up to check the time or silence an alarm, but suddenly he carried it everywhere. Into the shower, into the garage, even to take out the trash. And he changed the passcode. I still remember the sting of hearing the new one click into place the first time I asked, "What's the password again?" He didn't look up. "Just some numbers," he muttered. Some numbers. 12 years together, and my husband suddenly needed to hide some numbers from me. Then came the emotional distance, the coldness, the way he'd flinch slightly when I touched his arm, as if my affection reminded him of a commitment he no longer wanted. Family dinners became optional. Movie nights became tasks. Our conversations became shallow, careful, scripted. When I tried to bridge the gap, softly, lovingly, he always found a way to make me feel foolish for even asking. One night I said quietly, "You've been far away lately. Is everything okay?" He didn't even look up from his phone. "Linda, not everything is about your feelings. I'm dealing with my own stuff." Another night I suggested, "Maybe we should spend some time together, just the two of us." He scoffed. "I'm tired. Can you not make everything a big deal?" I went to bed that night facing the wall, wondering when my presence became a burden instead of comfort. But the moment that truly lodged in my chest happened in the car one afternoon. The kids were at school. The drive was quiet. Too quiet. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it quickly, too quickly, and placed it face down. I asked, "Who's that?" "A coworker," he said dismissively. I nodded, but something in his tone didn't feel right. It wasn't the lie itself. It was how easily it slid off his tongue. My mind drifted back to the therapist asking if either of us had been unfaithful or had feelings for someone else. I remembered how fast I said no, and how he hesitated just for a second. 3 seconds of silence, 3 seconds of truth slipping through the cracks. He eventually answered, "I've been thinking about someone from my past." His ex, the woman he loved years before he ever met me, the one he had called the first real love of his life. I tried to swallow the rising fear, but my pulse raced in my throat. "Why now?" I asked. "I don't know," he mumbled, staring out the window. "I just am." He didn't deny it. He didn't say it meant nothing. He didn't reassure me, even poorly. He let me sit there silently choking on insecurity while he retreated further into himself. After that day, his behavior grew more blatant. More late nights, more guarded conversations, more excuses about work, stress, needing space. And the worst part, the part that ripped through me even before the therapist's office, was that he seemed happier whenever he distanced himself. He laughed more at his phone than he had at anything I said in months. He smiled at messages I never saw. His posture changed when he read certain notifications. Relaxed, almost soft. Meanwhile, I felt like a shadow in my own home. Present but unseen. Needed only for convenience. And the realization began creeping in quietly. He wasn't mine anymore. Maybe he hadn't been for a long time. I didn't know then just how deep the betrayal went. I didn't know he'd been in contact with her again. I didn't know he was already imagining a life without me, imagining it so clearly that when the therapist asked him a simple question, he answered with a smirk that shattered everything. But the seeds of conflict were already planted, and I was already losing a battle I didn't even know he had started. There are moments in life when time doesn't just slow, it stops. When a single sentence becomes a blade so sharp it slices through years of history in one effortless motion. For me, that moment happened in a softly lit counseling room on a Tuesday afternoon, with my hands folded tightly in my lap and my heart beating so loud I could hear it echo in my ears. Our therapist sat across from us, pen poised delicately over her clipboard. I remember her gentle voice. Let's talk about honesty today. How have each of you been feeling toward one another? Honesty, the most ironic topic imaginable for the confession that was about to detonate in that room. My husband shifted beside me, his posture relaxed in a way that felt almost eerie. We'd been in therapy for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of him talking about my supposed emotional distance, my failures as a partner, the ways in which I had changed. I had taken every word seriously, every accusation to heart, believing we were both trying to rebuild something worth saving. But he wasn't rebuilding. He was preparing an exit. The therapist turned to him first. And you, how do you feel right now about the marriage? He exhaled, leaning back like he was settling into a movie seat. Honestly, I'm not sure this was ever right. My throat tightened. What does that mean? He looked at me for a moment, then away, as if the ceiling were easier to confront. It means I've been thinking about someone from my past, someone I used to love. My pulse began to pound. He had mentioned this woman before, briefly, softly, like a ghost he couldn't quite bury. But it never seemed dangerous until now. The therapist's tone was steady. Are you saying you have unresolved feelings for an ex? His jaw clenched, then relaxed. I don't know if it's feelings or clarity, but if she asked me today... He turned his head slowly, almost theatrically, until his eyes locked onto mine. I'd run back to her. Silence. Real silence. Not the awkward kind. This was heavy, suffocating, soul-crushing silence. The therapist gasped. Even she wasn't ready for that level of cruelty. My breath left my body in a single exhale. I felt it. The moment my heart didn't break, but numbed. A cold spread through my chest, like someone had opened a door in winter and let the wind swallow the room. I stared at him, forcing my voice to stay steady. Then run! His eyebrows shot up. He hadn't expected that. He expected me to fight, to beg, to plead, to perform some dramatic emotional scene that would give him proof of his own importance. He straightened. Linda, come on. That's not what I meant. No? I said softly. You just told your wife, in front of a therapist, that you'd leave her for another woman if she crooked her finger. The therapist tried to intervene. Let's take a moment. But I was already standing. I picked up my purse with hands that were miraculously calm. My legs felt like they were floating rather than walking. I stood tall, not shaking, not breaking, not pleading. He blinked at me. Can we talk about this? He asked, panic slipping into his voice for the first time. I'm done talking, I whispered. You've already said everything. I walked out of the room. No tears, no shaking breath, just the soft click of the door ending 12 years of partnership. I didn't go home. I couldn't. Instead, I drove aimlessly, streetlights blurring through tears I refused to let fall. My car led me somewhere I hadn't planned, my brother's house. When he opened the door and saw my face, he didn't ask. He just pulled me inside and held me the way someone holds a person trying not to shatter. What happened? He asked gently when I finally sat down. I told him everything, every word, every detail, every betrayal coded as honesty. He listened, jaw tightening, eyes darkening not with anger, but with the clarity of someone who saw the truth before I was ready to accept it. When I finished, he leaned back. "He's been cheating," he said simply. "I don't have proof," I whispered. "You don't need proof," he replied. "Men don't say things like that unless there's already something going on. Emotional affair, at least. Physical, maybe. But he's checked out." Those words hit harder than my husband's confession. Then my brother's girlfriend came home, a lawyer, a family law attorney who had seen this scenario unfold 1,000 times. She sat across from me and said the words I needed most, even if they terrified me. "You need to start protecting yourself." "Divorce?" I whispered, the word tasting bitter. "I'm not telling you to file," she said gently. "I'm telling you to prepare, and preparation doesn't mean ending things. It means knowing what you'd face if he decides to follow through on what he said in that room." She guided me through steps: documentation, phone records, financial separation, cloud backups. Each instruction felt like ripping out a stitch I had sewn into the fabric of my family. But I did it, because somewhere deep down I knew she was right. As the night grew darker, the truth I had been avoiding began to crystallize. My husband hadn't just drifted away. He had chosen someone else, emotionally, mentally, possibly physically. And his confession in therapy wasn't a mistake. It was a revelation of a decision he'd already made. It was the moment everything in my marriage snapped. It was the incident that ripped away every illusion I had left. And it was the beginning of a painful but necessary transformation I could no longer avoid. When the session ended and I walked out of that room, I didn't feel anger. Not yet. Anger would have been easier, justified, clean. What I felt instead was an overwhelming sense of hollowness, as if someone had scooped the center out of my chest and left me walking around with only the outline of a person I used to be. My husband's words kept replaying in my head like a broken recording. If my ex asked today, I'd run back to her. I'd run back. Run. I drove to my brother's house with both hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The world outside the windshield blurred, cars passing, lights flickering, people living normal lives while mine split open in the middle of a therapist's office. When my brother opened the door, he took one look at me and didn't ask a single question. He just guided me inside, closed the door gently, and said, "Sit." So I sat, and for a moment, I couldn't even speak. I stared at the hardwood floor and tried to convince myself this wasn't real. Eventually, the words came. They spilled out in uneven pieces. His confession, the smirk, the therapist's gasp, the coldness in his voice, the way he didn't flinch when he said he'd leave me. My brother listened quietly, his jaw tightening. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, the silence in the room felt heavy. Then he said it, the words I had been terrified to think but desperately needed to hear. "He's been cheating." A sharp breath escaped my lungs. "I don't know that," I whispered. "You do," he said gently. "You just don't want to admit it." My throat tightened. I wanted to deny it, fight it, defend him, but I couldn't. Something deep inside me knew my brother was right. All the signs I had ignored came rushing back. His secrecy, his distance, his sudden interest in therapy, only when he needed a moral landing spot. His phone glued to his hand. The late nights, the defensiveness, the coldness, and most damning of all, the way he spoke about his ex, not with nostalgia, but longing, with hunger. My brother's girlfriend came home around 6. When she saw me, her expression softened instantly. She set her bag down and sat across from me, speaking with the kind of calm that only someone who deals with heartbreak professionally could manage. "I'm so sorry you're going through this," she said, "but if you want my advice, you need to start protecting yourself, today." "I'm not ready to talk about divorce," I said, my voice small. "You don't have to be," she replied. "I'm talking about documentation, not decisions." I swallowed hard. "What do I need to do?" She opened her laptop. "First, you need to secure your digital life, change all your passwords, set up your own cloud, keep track of his behavior, check phone records if you can, look at credit card statements." Each suggestion felt like a betrayal, not of him, but of myself. It felt like accepting defeat. But it wasn't defeat. It was reality. It was self-preservation. "I don't want to spy on him," I whispered. "You're not spying," she said softly. "You're uncovering the truth he's already hiding." Those words settled deep in my chest. After a while, my phone buzzed on the table. My husband. The name lit up the screen like a wound opening. I didn't answer. He called again, and again. Then again. 5 calls in a row. Then the text started. "Where are you?" We need to talk. I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said. Please come home. Each message chipped away at something inside me. Not love, not trust, but the illusion that he deserved immediate forgiveness. I stared at the screen and felt something shift. I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't crying. I wasn't begging the universe to explain this to me. I was done. Later that night, my brother ordered pizza, trying to create some sense of normalcy. His girlfriend sat beside me, documenting everything: dates, comments, behavior patterns, assembling the story I had lived but never fully acknowledged. Around 10 p.m., my brother glanced through the peephole of his front door. He turned, lips pressed into a straight line. "It's him," he said quietly. "He's here." A cold wave washed over me. "Don't let him in," I whispered. "Not yet." For the first time since the counseling session, I felt something close to control. Not over him, over myself. I stood in my brother's kitchen, breathing deeply, trying to steady my hands. It was strange. This wasn't fear. It was resolve, determination. A boundary he hadn't expected me to be strong enough to set. I remembered the therapist's stunned face. I remembered his smirk. I remembered how easily he said he'd run back to another woman. That was the moment he left me. This moment was the beginning of me leaving him. 5 minutes later, I nodded to my brother. "Let him in." I didn't know what would happen next. I only knew I couldn't pretend anymore. Not for him, not for our marriage, not even for the children we both loved. Something fundamental had shifted inside me. I was no longer the woman waiting to be chosen. I was the woman choosing herself. Escalation doesn't always explode like a bomb. Sometimes it spreads slowly, swallowing everything in its path like a rising tide. The moment my brother opened the door and let my husband inside, the tide came rushing toward me. He looked wrecked, eyes red, hair disheveled, breathing uneven like he'd been running, even though we all knew he hadn't run after me once in that therapist's office. He stood in the doorway staring at me as if I were a stranger he wasn't prepared to face. "Linda," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Please, can we talk?" I didn't move, didn't cry, didn't soften. For once, silence was my armor. My husband took a shaky step into the living room, eyes darting between me and my brother. He clearly hadn't expected an audience, and he especially hadn't expected the second person sitting on the couch, my brother's girlfriend, the family law attorney, her laptop open, eyes calm but sharp. He froze when he saw her. What is she doing here?" he asked. "She's giving me advice," I said quietly. His face drained. "About what?" "About what to do," I replied, "when your husband tells a therapist he'd leave you if his ex asked." He flinched like I'd struck him, and for a moment I felt faint pity, until I remembered he wasn't the one who had heard that sentence. I was. "I didn't mean it," he insisted, voice trembling. "I was angry. I was overwhelmed. No," I cut in gently. "You meant it. You meant every word." He glanced at my brother, silently pleading for someone, anyone, to defend him. No one did. He reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "I want to fix this," he said desperately. "I want us. I want our family." I stared at him. "Why didn't you say that in therapy? Why didn't you say that before you told me you'd run back to another woman?" He swallowed. I was confused. "You weren't confused," I said softly. "You were cruel. There's a difference." His eyes filled with panic. "Linda, please, just come home. We can talk privately." "No," I said. "We're talking here, in the open, with people who aren't going to let you twist the narrative." My brother folded his arms. His girlfriend quietly continued typing notes. My husband exhaled shakily. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I don't want her. I want you." "Then show me your phone," I said. The room fell silent. My phone?" he stammered. "Yes," I said. "Unlock it. Hand it to me." He looked horrified. "You're violating my privacy." "You violated our marriage," I replied. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Linda, I just said something stupid in therapy. That's all." "Then unlocking your phone should be easy," I said calmly, "if there really is nothing to hide." He stepped back a little, chest rising faster now. "You're trying to control me." "No," I said. "I'm asking for honesty. For 3 months you've been distant, secretive. You've changed your passcode. You're always on your phone. And yesterday you admitted you're thinking about your ex. So either you show me your phone and prove you're faithful, or you walk out that door." My brother's girlfriend glanced up. "For the record," she said gently, "this request is reasonable. You confirmed you were in marriage counseling due to emotional distance and suspected infidelity. Transparency is a fair boundary." He glared at her. "You're poisoning her against me." My brother laughed under his breath. "You did that yourself. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, my husband whispered, "I haven't seen her in person." "Have you talked to her?" He hesitated. There it was. I stepped forward. "How long have you been in contact with her?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. His jaw clenched. His eyes filled with something that looked eerily like guilt. My brother stepped in. "Man, just say it." My husband broke. 3 months. The air left my lungs. My brother cursed under his breath. His girlfriend typed faster, documenting every word. "You've been talking to her for 3 months," I repeated slowly, "while we've been in therapy, while telling me I was the problem, while making me feel like I was losing my mind." "I didn't cheat physically," he said quickly. "It was just messages, calls, that's it." "Emotional affairs are still affairs," I said. "Show me the phone." He shook his head. "No." "Then get out." He sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. "Linda, please, I'll block her. I'll delete everything. You'll never hear her name again. Just don't give up on us." I wanted to scream, "Where was this energy yesterday? Where was this effort when I begged you to talk to me? Where was this urgency before you told a therapist you'd leave me?" But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't chase. "I'm not giving you a chance based on promises," I said. "I'm asking for truth." Slowly, reluctantly, he unlocked his phone and handed it over. His fingers trembled. I opened his messages. My stomach twisted. Hundreds of texts, late-night calls, plans to meet in person, photos she'd sent him, photos he'd sent her, conversations about their past, conversations about what could have been, conversations about our marriage. He wasn't confused. He wasn't overwhelmed. He wasn't lost. He was building a fantasy behind my back. When I looked up from the phone, his eyes were already wet. He knew I'd seen enough. My voice cracked, not from weakness, but finality. "I'm done," I whispered. "Go home, pack a bag, stay somewhere else tonight." "Please." "You will not sleep under the same roof as me," I said. "Not anymore." He sobbed, but I stepped aside and pointed to the door. "Leave." He left, crying, begging, promising, apologizing. But I didn't follow, didn't watch from the window, didn't feel guilty. The escalation wasn't his meltdown, it was my clarity. I closed the door with a soft click, leaned my forehead against the wood, and exhaled. I had taken the first step out of a marriage he abandoned long before I did. People think the darkest moment comes when the lie is exposed, or when the person you love looks you in the eye and tells you they'd choose someone else. But the true breaking point comes later, when the noise fades, when the adrenaline drains, and you're left alone with nothing but your own thoughts in a house that suddenly feels too big. That night, after kicking my husband out of the home we built together, I walked through every room in silence. The living room still smelled faintly of the cologne he wore when we first met. The gentle kind, not the sharp scent he started using recently when he began guarding his phone. Our wedding photos hung on the walls, moments frozen in time, mocking me with smiles I no longer recognized. The kids' artwork on the fridge felt like a punch to the ribs. Everything looked the same. Nothing felt the same. I sank onto the couch and let the quiet swallow me whole. The weight of the day, therapy, his confession, my brother's house, the messages, the lies, hit all at once. Tears threatened but didn't come. It was like my body was too tired, too stunned, too numb to release anything. I whispered into the empty living room, "How did we get here?" My voice cracked, thin and fragile. I thought about the woman I used to be, the woman who believed in us, the woman who adjusted her entire life around her husband's schedule, the woman who defended him when friends hinted at red flags I wasn't ready to see. I thought about the times I touched his back gently in the kitchen, asking if everything was okay, and he shrugged me off. I thought about every moment I felt him slipping away and how I told myself I was imagining it. But the truth was simple. He had left emotionally long before I demanded he leave physically. I tried to breathe, but the air felt thick, heavy, like it was laced with disappointment. My chest tightened until it hurt to inhale. So I moved, walked to our bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, stared at the indent in the mattress where he used to sleep. Everything in that space felt like a ghost. I picked up one of his t-shirts lying on the chair. It still smelled like him. I pressed it to my face without thinking, then recoiled, ashamed of the reflex, angry at myself for still reaching for pieces of a man who let me drown in silence while he built fantasies with someone else. I dropped the shirt. It pulled at my feet like something dead. I curled into myself, knees pulled tight to my chest, forehead resting against them. The tears finally came, slow at first, then fast, then uncontrollably. Raw, ugly, quiet sobs that felt like they were ripping out pieces of me each time my body shook. I cried for the marriage I thought I had. I cried for the woman I was losing. I cried for the children who would soon ask questions I didn't know how to answer. I cried for giving so much to a man who held so little space for my heart. And I cried because even after everything, I still loved him in some small, aching way. Grief is cruel like that. At some point, my phone buzzed beside me. The screen lit up with another message from him. Please come home. We can talk. I'm sorry. I stared at it through blurry eyes. The audacity of it. He wasn't sorry. He was desperate. Desperate because the consequences he never believed would catch up to him were suddenly real. But I didn't respond. Instead, I turned the phone face down, wiped my cheeks, and forced myself to breathe through the ache. Hours passed, maybe minutes. Time became slippery, indistinguishable. Eventually, I wandered back into the living room, collapsing onto the couch again. I stared at the ceiling until the patterns blurred. The darkness around me felt deep, thick, suffocating. I whispered again, softer this time. Why wasn't I enough? The silence answered back in the only way silence can, with brutal honesty. Because his choices were never about my worth. But knowing that didn't stop the bleeding inside my chest. I thought about the woman he still idealized, the one he admitted he'd run back to. I imagined the messages they exchanged, the tones of nostalgia and excitement, the emotional intimacy he once reserved for me, now alive in conversations I wasn't part of. That was the cut that hurt the deepest. Not the lie, not the secrecy, but the replacement. The knowledge that somewhere out there was a woman living inside the space in his heart that used to belong to me. I curled deeper into the couch cushions, trying to steady my breath, trying to convince myself this pain wouldn't kill me, trying to remind myself I wasn't weak. I was wounded, and wounds take time. But in that moment, I didn't feel strong. I didn't feel wise. I didn't feel brave. I felt broken, utterly, devastatingly broken. And that was my rock bottom. Not the affair, not the therapy session, not the confrontation. But the moment I realized I had loved him more than he ever loved me. The moment I understood that I had stayed loyal to a man who had already imagined a life without me. The moment I saw myself clearly, not as a failure, but as a woman who deserved better and didn't yet know how to believe that. That night, in that quiet house, with the weight of betrayal pressing against my ribs, I whispered one last thing into the darkness. I don't know how to start over. And even though the room was silent, something inside me, something small and faint and stubborn, whispered back, "You will." Turning points rarely look like triumph. They rarely arrive with dramatic speeches or sudden breakthroughs. Sometimes they take the shape of silence, a silence you finally stop fearing. Other times, they appear as a simple truth spoken by someone who has no agenda except helping you see what you've been avoiding. For me, the turning point came the morning after my darkest night. I woke up on the couch, wrapped in a blanket I didn't remember pulling over myself. My neck hurt, my face was tight from dried tears, and sunlight pooled across the floor in soft gold. For a moment, I didn't move. I listened to the ticking of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a lawnmower outside. Life was still happening, even if my marriage wasn't. I stood slowly, stretching my stiff body, and walked to the kitchen. My hands trembled as I filled the kettle, not from sadness, but from exhaustion, the kind that sits deep in your bones. When the water boiled, I made tea and held the warm mug between my palms like an anchor. And then my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another message from my husband. But when I glanced down and saw the name, my breath caught. It was his mother, a woman who had adored me for years. Someone who sent me birthday cards, brought soup when I was sick, and called me the daughter she never had. I wasn't prepared for her voice. "Linda," she said softly when I answered, "please tell me you're okay." No one had asked me that. Not really. Not without an agenda. My throat tightened. "I'm trying." She inhaled shakily. "He told me what happened in therapy." I closed my eyes, bracing for her to take his side, to defend him, to minimize what he said. But she didn't. Instead, she whispered, voice trembling, "I'm horrified. I never raised him to speak to his wife like that. You didn't deserve it." The tears hit before I could fight them. Quiet, hot, unstoppable. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do," I whispered. "You give yourself time," she said. "You let him face what he has done, and you take care of yourself and the kids, not him." Her words were the first time in weeks, maybe months, that someone truly saw my pain and didn't try to explain it away. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table and just breathed, slowly, deeply, and then something unexpected flickered inside me. Stillness, not numbness, not panic, just stillness. As though the storm inside me had finally exhausted itself. Then, around noon, the email arrived. It was from our phone carrier, the detailed phone and text records I had requested the night before, the very records my brother's girlfriend had recommended I secure. With a steady hand, I opened the attachment, and there it was, call after call, message after message, hours of conversations, late-night communication, daily contact, all with the same number, for 3 months straight. Proof, undeniable, unavoidable, undisputed. My heart didn't race, my hands didn't shake, I didn't cry. Instead, a calm washed over me. Not the fragile calm of denial, not the numb calm of shock, but the empowered calm of clarity. It was the first moment I wasn't confused, the first moment I wasn't questioning myself, the first moment I wasn't wondering if I had pushed him away or overreacted or misread the signs. It was the moment I realized it was never my fault. It was never about me. It was about his choices, his cowardice, his brokenness, not mine. My phone buzzed again, another long, emotional message from him. I love you. I made a mistake. I want our family. Please don't give up on us. But this time, reading his words felt like reading the script of a person who realized too late that consequences were real. And I suddenly understood something. He didn't want me. He wanted the version of life I provided. He wanted the safety net. He wanted the structure. He wanted the comfort. But he did not choose me when it mattered. I locked my phone and walked into the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror, the swollen eyes, the exhaustion, the pain. But beneath all that, something new was emerging. Strength. Quiet strength. Not the dramatic, fiery kind that demands attention. The kind that grows in shadows, rebuilding you from the inside. This is not your ending, I whispered to my reflection. This is your awakening. And for the first time since my husband confessed his betrayal, I believed it. Later that afternoon, I opened my closet and pulled out a small suitcase. I didn't know exactly what the next days would look like. Lawyers, custody discussions, paperwork, hard conversations with my children. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. My life was no longer tied to a man who treated my loyalty like a disposable convenience. My turning point wasn't a dramatic confrontation. It was a quiet shift inside myself, a decision, a reclaiming. I decided to stop being the woman who begged to be loved and became the woman who walked away when she was not. Fallout is never instant. It doesn't explode in a single moment. It unravels slowly, piece by piece, as the truth finally forces everyone to face the consequences they tried to escape. And in my case, the fallout didn't fall on me. It fell on him, on her, on the fragile illusion they had built together. I was simply standing far enough away to watch it collapse without being crushed underneath it. After the turning point, after I saw the call logs, after I realized the truth he'd been hiding for months, I stopped responding to his messages altogether. I didn't block him yet, not out of hope, but because I wanted to see how far he would go. And he went far. He texted. He called. He emailed. He even left long voicemails where his voice shook between anger, desperation, and a panic he hadn't shown when he emotionally abandoned me. Please, Linda, we can fix this. You're overreacting. Don't ruin our family. I love you. I made a mistake. One mistake. I didn't mean what I said in therapy. One mistake. One. As if the past 3 months of secrecy, emotional infidelity, and fantasies about another woman didn't count because he wasn't caught physically in bed with her. The irony was suffocating. 2 days after I discovered the phone records, my boss called. Linda, your husband is in the lobby. My heart dropped, but her voice stayed calm. He's demanding to see you. Security is with him. I already told him you're not available. I didn't answer. I didn't trust my voice. Listen, she continued softly. You're relocating soon. If you'd prefer to work remotely for your remaining 2 weeks, I'll approve it. The relief that washed through me felt like someone loosening a rope tied too tightly around my chest. Thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me, she said. Just protect yourself. Protect myself. A phrase everyone seemed to repeat lately. While I found a strange, growing clarity, he was unraveling. A mutual friend reached out. Linda, he's losing it. He told everyone what he said in therapy, and now people are asking questions he can't answer. Another message. He's telling people he didn't mean it, that he was just frustrated. Another. He's crying to his mom. She's furious with him. I didn't take pleasure in any of it. I wasn't seeking revenge, and I wasn't watching his collapse with satisfaction. If anything, it confirmed a painful truth. He only realized what he had when he lost the comfort of it. Not me, not my love, but the ease of having me hold his world together while he drifted somewhere else emotionally. Then the fallout reached her, his ex, the woman he openly said he'd run back to. Her husband found out. Her marriage, already strained from the emotional affair she'd been participating in, finally snapped. Through a mutual connection, I learned she's facing her own divorce. She denied everything until the phone records came out. She's been crying nonstop. Her husband kicked her out. They're comparing timelines and everything matches. I felt nothing. Not joy, not triumph, not vindication. Just emptiness. Because her destruction wasn't my victory. It was simply a consequence of a betrayal that hurt multiple lives, not just mine. When my phone rang again, I recognized the familiar voice. Linda, my mother-in-law, said softly. He told me everything. I want you to know. I support whatever decision you make. That stunned me. She was a woman who fiercely believed in marriage vows, in perseverance, in fixing things until there was nothing left to fix. If even she had reached her limit, then the damage was beyond repair. He's not the man I raised, she whispered, voice cracking. You didn't deserve this. I covered my mouth with my hand, tears threatening again, but this time they weren't from loss. They were from finally being seen. Fallout always hits the innocent the hardest. When I finally told the kids that Mommy and Daddy would be living in separate houses for a while, my son cried quietly, his shoulders shaking as he leaned into me. My daughter asked, in her small, trembling voice, "Is it because we were bad?" That was the moment my heart truly broke. I held them both, rocking them gently, whispering over and over, "No, no, sweetheart, you did nothing wrong. This is between the grown-ups. You are safe. You are loved." And I repeated it until they finally believed me enough to loosen their grip around my arms. Over the next few days, more truth surfaced. Friends of the other woman reached out. Neighbors of hers confirmed late-night calls, emotional explosions, fights behind closed doors. His ex-husband, now future ex, called me. "My wife contacted him multiple times after your confrontation," she said, "even after she told you she ended it. We compared timelines. Every lie aligned perfectly." She whispered, "I'm sorry you were dragged into this." "I'm sorry you were too," I replied. 2 families wrecked, 2 futures dismantled, 2 people caught in the emotional crossfire of a relationship they didn't choose. Because 2 adults couldn't let go of a fantasy. The surprising part? My fallout was calm. I filed paperwork. I answered lawyer emails. I packed my things. I created a parenting plan. I stopped responding to every message from him, because each one was just another attempt to undo damage he never should have caused. And eventually something incredible happened. I felt peace. Not happiness, not excitement, not healing yet. Just peace. A quiet, steady, powerful peace that settled into my bones. Because for the first time since the erosion began, I wasn't waiting for him to choose me. I had already chosen myself. Healing didn't arrive as a celebration. It didn't come with triumph or a sudden realization that everything was magically okay. It came quietly, slowly, like sunlight creeping across a room in the early morning. Soft, gentle, inevitable. In the weeks after the divorce papers were filed, people kept telling me I was strong, that they admired how calm I was, that most women would have screamed, cursed, thrown things, begged for answers, demanded revenge. But strength isn't always loud. Sometimes strength is silence. Sometimes strength is choosing not to engage. Sometimes strength is taking one step forward when everything in you wants to collapse. My strength was deciding not to stay with a man who didn't choose me. The first night I slept alone in my home after the separation, I lay awake for hours, listening to the quiet. It wasn't the same suffocating quiet I'd felt when he emotionally abandoned me months earlier. This quiet was peaceful, gentle, a reset instead of a void. I walked through the house, touching the walls, the photos, the bookshelves, not in mourning, in reclaiming. This was my home now, not a stage for someone else's emotional affair, not a waiting room for someone else's indecision. Just mine. My children adjusted faster than I expected. They asked questions, yes. They cried, yes. But they also laughed with me, hugged me tighter, and slowly began to trust that happiness could still exist in 2 homes instead of 1. I learned how to braid my daughter's hair for school. My son taught me new soccer drills in the backyard. We started building new routines, ones that weren't patched around broken promises. I began to feel human again. One evening, weeks later, as I stood by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky pink, I whispered to myself, "You survived." And for the first time, I didn't just say it, I felt it. I wasn't angry anymore, not at him, not at her, not at myself. Anger requires attachment, and I had finally let go. If there is one thing I want anyone listening to this story to understand, one thing I wish someone had told me earlier, it is this. You can love someone deeply and still walk away. You can grieve someone and still grow past them. You can lose a marriage and still find yourself. What broke me in therapy that afternoon wasn't my husband's confession. It was realizing how long I had ignored the version of myself that deserved better. The woman I am now is not the woman who walked into that counseling room trembling with hope. She is stronger, softer, wiser, and she no longer begs for love that should be freely given. Sometimes the life you rebuild after losing someone is far more beautiful than the life you had while keeping them. And in the end, that is the lesson I carry. Leaving is not failure. Staying in the wrong story is. Choose yourself, even if your voice shakes, especially when your heart breaks. Choose yourself.